Hello and welcome to Towel Capes. I'm Cody Nestor. He's Todd Hill.
What's up, guys?
Today we're here to talk about X-Men 97. So, Todd, spoilers for the first 4 episodes of X-Men 97 are ahead.
Okay.
So, Todd, I want to get you to start us off. I'm interested to hear what you thought of X-Men 97.
I got to say right off the bat, I thoroughly enjoyed this. This is probably the most excitement I've had for a Marvel property, I would say, since Across the Spider-Verse.
Yeah, I think it's a fair statement. Yeah, I think Marvel property, Disney property,
True.
as well. Disney's bringing back X-Men 97. I think we were all kind of wondering like how this would go to bring back such a kind of beloved, animated series. Probably in
Right.
most people's, if you're a fan of superhero cartoons, animated shows, those kind of things, it's probably in people's top 5, I would say at least.
I would say definitely up there,
I
yeah.
think there's a lot of people like us. Batman the animated series probably at the top. I know
me,
it is definitely for us.
Yeah.
Probably a debate between Spider-Man and X-Men being in that top 5 as well, and what
Right.
order they appear in. Other shows like Gargoyles and those kind of things. But
Yeah.
this was always, one of my favorite shows to watch. It definitely delivered. I was really kind of skeptical about what we were going to get into, and would it be just a bunch of member berries and nostalgia?
Mm-hmm.
Like, were we going to bring anything new to the show? Like, what were we going to do with it? Is it just a cash grab using the name X-Men 97?
Yeah.
Using that style. But to say, I mean, really, it honestly is a really good show, and there's a few issues here and there, but overall it's pretty solid.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna throw some stuff at you just to see what you thought about. What about the opening credits? It's tweaked slightly, but what did you think about the opening credits?
Still awesome. Still awesome. I love how now Morph and Bishop have their own little title card intros.
Yeah, I don't know if it's it seems like we've watched the first 4 episodes to this point at time of recording. It seems like they add something every time.
Yeah.
Did you notice those? It seems like there's always something Magneto, he comes in our second episode. He's not in the introductory character credits in the
Yeah.
first episode, and then when he takes over, he's in the
He's
second
in there, yeah.
And then you just get little things that pop up, and like you said, Morph gets highlighted here, Bishop gets highlighted in some kind of I'm falling back in time thing,
Right.
or whatever. But I mean, the music is tweaked slightly, but I mean, it still
works,
It's
man.
still there. Something I want to point out too: the end credits. Did you notice they still got the?
Oh, they
characters?
still got the little spin with their little properties and characteristics.
With
Yeah.
with their powers and
Yeah.
talking about those. I kind of wish they'd still just kept with that 90 cheesy early compute. No, that
yeah.
the music, but that early.
Oh, like that CGI, early CGI
early
looking
90s
graphics.
CGI, and just had them
Yeah.
still look like that. But that's not that's just a nitpick of mine. But it's still cool that there's kind of an homage kind of back to that.
Exactly, yeah.
Somewhere early to start. What about the voice acting here?
Nobody really put me off or anything as far as voice acting on here. I thought everybody was pretty spot on for who they were playing. I know some of the OGs are back. I think Wolverine's original was back.
Cal Dodd's back as Wolverine. You got Allison Smith as Storm. Lenore Zan as Rogue. George Buzza as Hank McCoy. Christopher Britton shows up as Mr. Sinister, and Ray Chase and Matthew Waterston replaced the late Norm Spencer and David Hemblin as Cyclops and Magneto. They passed away, I think, back in 2020. Yeah, I think the voice acting is solid. I think there's a few places it's a bit stilted, I would say. Like, it lacks... Maybe the way to phrase it is it lacks a little bit of polish sometimes.
Okay.
And I mean, you are bringing back people that voiced these characters 30 years ago. And like for someone like Cal Dodge, you can't, it's kind of like the James Earl Jones thing. You can't get that resonance and that deep kind of growl like you could when you're in your 30s or 40s when you first did the voice. So like it's different, but I don't think anybody here is like miscast. There's nobody that stands out as like, ooh,
this is really off. Yeah, nobody likes that.
This is wrong to my ear. Like, everybody's solid. Gambit's solid, Rogue solid. She seems even a little bit more
southerny.
Yeah, kind of this time. Yeah,
more corn pone.
She really gives me more of like, I don't know, like a Dolly Partonish vibe like this time around, something like that. I'm not really sure, but yeah, something else to highlight here, just to kind of go through the facets of the show before we kind of get into the story a little bit. I don't want to go too deep into it, but I think the action is a highlight here. The animation in itself is like a highlight, but the action is really like
really good,
a strong suit. Like in the first episode, we really get a really good fight with some Sentinels, and then some stuff in episode 2 and 3, which we'll talk about. But like the animation here, that was probably my biggest worry, because like I think we all have a little bit of nostalgia goggles when it comes to the X-Men animated series.
Yeah,
it wasn't always the sharpest, best animated show out there.
Yeah.
And I mean, a lot of things were like that. A lot of things suffered from budget constraints and those kind of things. And we know that superheroes and superhero properties weren't treated with the same reverence back in the mid 90s as they are now, when you can get a budget behind a show like this. So I think we all look back on it like a little bit fonder than it actually was in terms of its animation.
Yeah.
But I think this is it's reminiscent enough of the original, and it has its own kind of style.
Yeah.
And I think the biggest thing that I kind of enjoyed about this overall, and I think it goes to the animation and to the stories and to the characters, it's like the 90s X-Men kind of grew up. Because we were, I was a kid when I was watching it. A lot of the audience that's coming back to this, they grew up watching it. Now you're bringing it back. X-Men 97, that your target demographic is people that watched it when they were my age.
Right.
Like, so you have to kind of grow it up with those people.
Exactly.
Like,
yeah.
I think this is like, it kind of walks that line of like a Batman the animated series or even the X-Men animated series of the time. But I think Batman animated series has kind of always been like the gold standard when it comes to like stories that children can enjoy, but also it has enough there for adults to enjoy as well.
Right.
It's like an all ages kind of show, and I think this kind of walks that line a little bit.
I think so
with
too.
it.
Yeah.
I think it kind of delivers on both. I think there's enough there for kids, but it grows up. It grows up the characters. We're not just kind of stuck in where exactly they were when the show ended.
Yeah.
Like we're kind of evolving past that a little bit. It's 2024, so we got to mention this. Some of the woke-aversity, Todd. So a point of contention for some folks before this was coming out was about Morph. Apparently, it was stated somewhere that Morph was non-binary. If you hadn't heard, Todd,
I had heard. Yeah.
Rogue, she's not as double-cheeked up as she was in the 1990s.
Gotcha.
Apparently, if you didn't notice that, Todd, I assume since you're not some kind of beta male cuck, that these changes have made the show completely unwatchable for you, right? It's just too woke for Eddie T, right?
Actually, none of this stuff has bothered me so far.
Because it's not a thing.
Yeah.
It's not made a point of. Like, Morph doesn't walk into a bathroom with Logan taking a piss and be like, I'm non-binary. By the way.
I mean, he's non-binary in the show, but it's not to where it's detracting from the stories they're trying to tell.
But it's not
It's not a
mentioned.
focus. It's not in your face.
Yeah.
I'm Morph. I'm non-binary.
It's
you
not.
know?
It's not mentioned. Nobody asks him about his sexuality. It's just
who he is.
It's just who he is. It's just whatever. And like Rogue not being double cheeked up, and like, if that's really a reason that you would not give this show a chance, that's your own problems, man.
Yeah.
Like that's your own issues you need to deal with. If you're like really turned off by a animated character not being as thick as she was in the 90s,
right.
That's your own problems,
Yeah.
dude. You need to like worry about yourself and figure that out. I can't help you there, but it's not a problem. She's kind of more of a real person. that's not like they focus some on her character, but like it's not. It's a controversy if you want to ask
Yeah.
me. Like I know that people have their problems with Disney, and like maybe one day this video we put on one of those things where they're like, look at these two fucking Disney shield. Look at that fat piece of shit taking that Disney money. You know what I
Okay.
mean? Maybe we'll get clipped like that, but this is such a non-thing.
Yeah.
Like it's always like I think people make a living and they make their money on YouTube and other places by like stirring this shit up. And good on them. Whatever, you're making
Right.
your money, you're doing your thing, you have your audience. But like realistically, if it's not a thing.
Yeah, and I kind of saw this comment come up a few times when people were talking about this on social media. And if you think about a group of characters that would be more appropriate for bringing in some stuff like this, the
It's always
X-Men.
been an allegory for
Yeah.
racism and
yeah.
the civil rights movement.
That's
and
what they created
the
for.
bane of like humanity and how we treat each other. It's always been a political
Exactly.
allegory at its heart. If there was a property that it would be expected or okay or understood that you could bring in more of a political edge to it and modernize it for today, it would be
It
X-Men.
would be X-Men, yeah.
Like maybe it doesn't fit so much as like if you do it as like a Spider-Man show
Right.
or whatever else, but literally that's what it was born out of.
Yeah,
Your
that's
main
what- yeah.
character is, the leader of the school was a disabled person, and like it's like it's just it was kind of ahead of its time when it was created, and it was to kind of match the times without specifically referencing all the bad shit that was happening in America
Right.
at the time. It was a way to tell those stories without pointing out exactly what it was
An
what it was-
allegory for.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, like, it just, I don't know. It's not a thing. Like
Yeah.
if you were somehow like, you're not watching the show because you've heard some of this stuff going around, watch it, make your own choices
Yeah.
and decisions about it. I don't think that it's a factor at all. The morph stuff is not. It's not spoken about.
Yeah.
And if you're all right with Rogue looking like a normally proportioned woman, then I think you're probably fine.
Right.
Like there's nothing wrong with the way she looked in the 90s, and there's nothing wrong with the way she look now.
No.
It's just, again, things grow up a
That's
little bit,
it.
and you have to grow up a little bit with them.
Exactly.
And we've always kind of been proponents of everything doesn't always have to be the same.
Exactly.
You can evolve
Exactly.
things over the years and make them different, and I don't think any of the changes that's been made here have been for reasons that don't make sense or
No, nothing so far.
don't
Nothing.
fit.
No.
So let's talk about the episodes a little bit about what's going on. So I'll kind of take us through a little bit of episode 1. I'll let you do episode 2, and
Okay.
we'll kind of switch off a little bit. So not to super deep dive in. These are like 25 to 30-minute episodes. But basically we're picking up episode 1. Professor X. He's dead. I think he's mentioned that he was killed by not Trask but Gyrich.
Gyrich.
Henry
yes.
Gyrich was responsible for the assassination of Professor Xavier, and the world is kind of dealing with the loss of that. It's kind of set the world up to look at mutants in a more what's the word I'm looking for? Like looking at them in a different light,
Right.
Looking at them in a more favorable light. They've kind of seen the plight of the mutants, and with Xavier's sacrifice and with the X-Men and what he was trying to do and his mission to like have a world with like where humans and mutants could coexist. People have looked at mutants now a little bit more favorably than they did when the show first aired. And that's kind of growing that up a little bit. And then you also have, the team kind of dealing with the lost Professor Xavier. Scott's kind of trying to cope with leading the X-Men, trying to fill in for Xavier, and also he's got Jean. She's pregnant. They're
Yeah.
about to have a child. She's ready to pop any second. And then you get kind of some good, like, kind of interpersonal dynamics here. Basically, it starts off where some new goons on the scene. They've kidnapped a rich kid named Roberto. I forget his last name. Do you remember?
I think, was it DaCosta?
Yeah, Roberto DaCosta, who's basically Sunspot.
Sunspot,
You'll come to kind of find out. They're kind of working. They think all the Sentinels have kind of been wiped out, basically, at this point, that they destroyed the original Master Mold. There's no more Sentinels. There's nothing like that. They're also trying to figure out where Trask is. So Trask and Gyrich kind of famously kind of worked together through the original show. He's still out there. Gyrich is in jail, but Trask is kind of still out there. And they think that maybe he's behind some of this tech that's kind of popping up with these kind of like radical, mutant hating kind of goons that have kind of popped back up here.
Yeah.
And then you get within that, you know, them trying to work with Roberto and trying to kind of find him and protect him and figure out what's going on, why they wanted him, why they're kind of capturing mutants. You get some good moments between some characters. There's a good character moment where Rogue, they all kind of go to a nightclub looking for some information. And you get a good little scene between Rogue and Gambit.
Right.
Kind of bring back up her character arc of, you know, not really ever being able to really get close to someone, not being able to really kind of, you know, fully give herself to somebody. You know,
Right.
her and Gambit have, you know, still having, though not being able to kind of be as intimate that they like to be together. So you
Yeah.
get a little moment between them. You also have a little moment between Wolverine and Morph, because Wolverine's definitely hinted at it. He's having some issues coping with the fact that Jean's not going to be around much
Right.
longer. He's kind of already seeing the writing on the wall that Cyclops and Jean, they don't want to stay around a school where Apocalypse could attack at any minute, or
Yeah.
any number of things could happen at the school and it be attacked at any moment. That's not anywhere to raise a family. So he's kind of dealing with that as well. And then that kind of all boils down to them. The X-Men here, they're showing more working with the UN, working with the government, and they end up going down and finding out that Trask is in the Sahara.
Oh, yeah.
So they end up tracking him down, and that's where we get our real big first kind of fight of the show. A really good kind of fight between the X-Men and a bunch of kind of leftover Sentinels that he has, and another version, I guess, of Master Mold.
Master Mold, yeah.
That Trask was kind of hiding. But they have that really good fight in the desert, and the episode 1 kind of sets up and ends with our big kind of twist, I guess, or is that Charles Xavier, with his last will and testament, left all of his funds, left the school, the charge and the keep of the X-Men, all to who, Todd?
Magneto.
His ex-best friend, possibly but only friend. Nah,
Right. Not
friend.
only friend.
But no, his ex kind of best friend and kind of foil, Eric Lyncher as Magneto. So we get that kind of last kind of few shots of Magneto kind of within the school, and like, oh, what the fuck is going on here?
Right, right.
How is Magneto here? How's this going to kind of play out? For a debut episode, fairly pretty strong.
Pretty strong. Yeah, I would agree.
If you had to kind of put a number on this one, review-wise, rating-wise, what would you rate this one?
I would definitely give this one an 8. I think it was great.
Yeah, I think I'm going like a 7, but yeah, it's in that good to kind of great territory. I mean, you're kind of setting up some things. I mean, besides that, we get a little bit of Beast, we get a little bit of Jubilee. She's still as useless as ever. I don't know what fireworks really do for you,
Right.
But she's kind of set up to have a little romantic kind of interest in Roberto.
Right.
They're kind of set up there. They're kind of similar ages and things like that. So they're kind of setting that up as well. But I mean, pretty strong opening episode.
For our initial episode, very strong, I thought.
What's going on in episode 2?
So in episode 2, you know, we've had the bombshell drop that now, you know, Magneto pretty much has the run of everything. You know, Scott, of course, is not dealing with this well at all. Him and Jean is kind of postponed, maybe leaving. They want to stick around. At least Scott does. And we kind of find out that they're, I think it was their liaison at the UN. They kind of show up at the mansion. They want to arrest Magneto for his previous crimes. He kind of magnetically takes over their helicopters, pointing the blades towards them, getting ready to cut them in half. And
I really like how his powers, not to cut you off, but I like how his powers are depicted here.
yeah,
Like, it's definitely, you sense that it's more, you know, I think in the movies you get a lot of it. A lot of times it's like Magneto, he could just move metal, but he's the master of magnetism, not the master of metal.
Right.
So you get a lot more of like showcase of his powers, like in a cool and kind of interesting way is here. One other thing too to note, one really scene that I loved in episode 2 is there's like a small scene between Jean and Storm. Kind of didn't mention Storm in the first episode. Storm is definitely set up as, like, you see, she's more set up now as like the Omega level mutant that she
Right.
is. Like she's the one that kind of really clears out those Sentinels in episode 1. So you kind of really get to see her kind of highlighted and like in a spotlight of like she really isn't a mega level threat. But she and Jean kind of have a nice little scene, and they're kind of like talking about how Jean kind of wishes that the baby would be born human to kind of be spared some of the turmoil that it would have to go through as a mutant, and she just wants kind of a normal life for it as much as possible. So that's a good little, again, we're kind of growing up, little character dynamics, interactions, that kind of stuff is some of the best stuff that you get in some of these 4 episodes. Continue though. Sorry.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. And so Magneto, he's trying to kind of walk Xavier's path. He's trying to walk this path of tolerance and trying to coexist with the humans. So he kind of agrees to stand down and be taken into custody and go stand trial for his former crimes. And so him and I think it was Cyclops, Storm, Beast,
Storm, maybe Beast. I don't know. I can't remember.
There was a little bit group of them. I think the only 2 that stays back at the mansion were maybe Wolverine and Jean, and we'll see why here in a second.
Yeah.
So while they're down at the UN and Magneto's standing trial, Jean goes into labor, and I thought that was a pretty cool little scene where I think she says like, "He's here," and Wolverine's like, "Who? Apocalypse?" She's like, "The baby."
And she just like telepathically moves his keys and his jacket into his hand.
So he goes on like full blown panic mode. This crazy fighter. Take on any kind of challenge, but he's sweating bullets trying to get a girl to a hospital rather than having a kid.
Yeah, and almost running over people and dogs and everything else in his way to do so.
So while Magneto, not Wolverine, Magneto is standing trial, we see that I guess it was at the Anti-Human League,
something like that.
One of those groups has kind of set up this guy. They call him the Executioner, and he has this Executioner, and he's kind of made his way down to the UN with plots to assassinate Magneto.
Yeah, he's got like a special rifle that we'll learn more about in kind of episode 4.
Right.
He's got kind of a special rifle that basically. They're shown in the show. They have these like kind of mutant power blocking collars.
Right.
It's basically an amped up, more focused dose of that radiation that's found within those collars that like dampen your powers while wearing them. This is like a focus shot that's made to basically eliminate your powers for good. And he ends up using that against Magneto, but Storm is also there with Magneto trying to like quell some of the riot, and she ends up taking the bullet meant for Magneto.
Right. Scott and Rogue kind of takes Scott to the hospital to be with Jean, and they're refusing to deliver the baby at the hospital.
Yeah, that was another little thing that I thought was interesting. Like, something he really didn't think about, but it's like, we don't do mutant births here.
Yeah.
And it's like, what?
Yeah.
And I was just thinking about it too, and I was like, did Jean and Scott have no birth plan? They hadn't had a doctor or anything picked out for this, or a hospital. They knew that they were very irresponsible of Jean and Scott not to have any kind of birth plan.
So Rogue actually, saps the doctor's knowledge and learns how to deliver a baby, and she delivers their baby,
which is cool. It's a nice little idea.
Yeah, and as you say, the other X-Men are trying to kind of do crowd control, which leaves kind of Storm and Magneto inside the UN trial area, and she kind of takes that shot protecting Magneto.
Yeah, and later back at the mansion, we see kind of Beast breaks the news to her. This power loss is most likely permanent.
Yeah,
this kind of obviously crushes her, and it also kind of leads Jean to she's the one that's really pushing to leave.
Oh yeah.
And this kind of like changes her mind a little bit to stay, for Storm to be there to help figure out the situation, help them get her powers back. And this kind of Storm kind of knows this, and she doesn't want to be the reason that Jean and Cyclops stay, so she decides to be the one that leaves.
And she writes a note to all of them. I don't remember it word for word, but that's pretty powerful stuff.
Yeah, it was. It was a good little kind of like scene there where they're kind of reading the note all together, and you kind of hear her voice over to Jean, kind of reading the note. But yeah, she decides to actually be the one to leave, and then we also, I think, you get kind of a good moment, like, because after she loses her powers, she has that kind of like, I can't feel the air and I can't feel this. But there's also a good little moment where she's back at the mansion and a storm starts, like
it startles her,
and it actually startles her. And I was like, I thought that was like a good little character moment, because like any other time she would have known that was coming, it wouldn't have been anything. But like, she's actually startled by the weather outside actually coming upon them so soon. And I thought that was just a little again, there's good little nuggets of like really good little character stuff here. But yeah, that basically the last thing in episode 2 is we get a knock on the door.
Yeah.
Morph is dead set that Storm, she'll go out for a day and she'll come back. And right at that same time, the doorbell rings. And who's at the door other than
Another Jean Grey.
Jean Grey? So that kind of leaves us like, what the fuck is going on
Right.
here? And that takes us into episode 3. And Jean Grey number 2 kind of shows up. And then, long story short, we learn that Jean Grey that shows up at the X Mansion from Beast, he kind of does a test on her DNA. I think he says he carbon dates it and finds
Something
out
like
that her DNA is older and that most likely she's the real Jean Grey, the one that's just shown up at the mansion, and the one that has just had Scott's baby and has been there for this time is actually a clone of Jean Grey created by Mr. Sinister. And I was like, I know this is a storyline in the comics, and I know this is something that was done, and I think it was interesting to go into it here, and I think it was this episode was definitely my favorite.
Yes.
Episode 3 was
of the 4, this was my favorite as well. Yeah.
Episode 3 was really awesome, I thought, because you get a lot of stuff with Jean and a lot of stuff with her character, and also now this other character who we'll kind of refer to her now. She calls herself the Goblin Queen, because we see I think there's one problem I'll mention to it when we get to episode 4 that I have with episode 3. And it's not so much episode 3 itself. It's just something I wish they would have done here. But we get Jean's kind of dealing with this news. She's convinced to her, she's the real Jean Grey. She has all these memories. She's just had a son with Scott. How could this be true?
Yeah.
We see her kind of go into Nathan, which is the name of their son, Nathan Charles Summers. And she goes into his room and she gets kind of a broadcast kind of coming over on Nathan's baby monitor from Mr. Sinister. And I love Mr. Sinister's voice. I think that
really
guy does
cool.
a great Mr. Sinister. And he's kind of talking to her, telling her what's happened. Yes, you are the clone. I created you. I have control of your mind. And he kind of flips that switch in her mind, and that turns her from Jean Grey, wife and mother, to Jean Grey, badass bitch, the Goblin Queen.
The Goblin Queen.
And you see her outfit change, and she's in her traditional Goblin Queen kind of comic costume. And she starts, it's like a kind of a surreal horror movie for a while. She's messing with all the X-Men. She's got a little, there's I think Morph's in the bathroom. And who is it he sees? Is it Wolverine?
Wolverine's in the shower.
Yeah, he's Wolverine's in the shower. And then you've got Rogue and Roberto. They're something crawls out of the TV at them, in the ring. And then what else? There's another one there that was really good too.
Was it one where Gambit kind of walks in on Rogue and Magneto, and they're all flesh melty together?
Yeah, that's another thing in this too that we hadn't mentioned yet. So it's kind of stated, and it's kind of mentioned that Rogue and Magneto at some point had a
little something,
had a little something, had a past relationship.
Yeah.
And you see Gambit through just his kind of subtle reactions to things that he's starting to take notice that they're getting a little closer together.
A little chummy.
There's a really good little scene where Wolverine and Morph coming out of the danger room, and they've just been training. And he's like, "Oh, let's see who's got the training room next." And he's like, "Oh, it looks like Magneto and Rogue have it booked for several hours."
Yeah, that was cool.
And Rogue, and Gambit's like, "That's not true." And Wolverine is like, "Oh, I think you just made his hush puppies go up into his body." It's good stuff, but that little joke about, "Oh, it looks like Magneto," he's just fucking with
It's
them.
just a good little young team banter you would have.
Yeah, it's just you would just have that within that that team dynamic. It's just a funny little scene. But yeah, he walks in on his little horror vision that the Goblin Queen puts in his head is Magneto and Rogue kind of embracing, and skin is touching each other and drawing into each other. And I think he comes out of it and he's like, "I'll never forget that," or I can't unsee that, or something like that. But she kind of messes with them all, and she kind of runs off. She ends up taking the baby. She takes Nathan to Sinister, and Sinister starts to, he has had this plan in motion because he knows that the baby with the genes of Scott Summers and Jean Grey could be an all-powerful mutant.
Right.
And he wants to make sure that baby survives in a way, and he wants to turn it invincible, so he puts it in this green vat of ooze to somehow turn it invincible. And then you get a good scene of Cyclops and Magneto, and let's see, who else is it? I think, does Gambit go? It's a few of them go to the Sinister Mansion. I know Morph's there because Morph is the one taken because
Morph's there
because he's kind of PTSD traumatized by what Sinister's done to him in the past,
Right.
and his involvement with Sinister, so he kind of takes that little like strike team to that little Sinister mansion, and there's like some good fight scenes between her and the other X-Men, but then Jean, real Jean
Jean
is
shows
the
up.
one that really, she shows up telepathically basically to be the one that really kind of shows Clone Jean the truth and like kind of release her mind from it. And like I mean like this I'm telling you, this episode like really like sold me on like the potential that this series can have. Like it was real, and from animation, from the storytelling. My only problem is I just wish it was drawn out a little bit more. I honestly, because we haven't talked about episode 4 yet, by far the weakest episode.
Exactly. I
But
thought so as well.
Take 3 and make it a 2-parter. And what
Yeah.
you do is take episode 3 and stretch out that Jean and Goblin Queen story a little bit, and episode 4 cut out all the Jubilee crap. Like I'm sorry, but cut out all that
Yeah.
stupid crap. We haven't even talked about it. But it's like it's a Jubilee and Roberto episode with Mojo. So that should tell you enough right there. If you're a fan of this show, cut that crap, and then put in more of the Storm and Forge stuff, which we haven't got to,
Oh,
and
yeah.
make that like a 2-parter. And I
Yeah.
think that would have been perfect. Like, because like episode 3 is by far like the strongest. Anything else I'm forgetting here, Todd? Other than like the ending scene where we get kind of Clone Jean going away.
I think that's it. Yeah, I think you pretty much nailed it.
Yeah, once Sinister's plan is it's prevented. They end up rescuing Nathan, but the process of whatever he was going through was interrupted. So now he's kind of infected with this kind of like it's like I think how does it be? It's like a bio kind of organic virus, like a tech bio kind of virus. And you kind
Right.
of see it kind of depicted on his body, and so there's no cure for it. Obviously, in this timeline, and this is stuff straight out of the comics. Anybody that's a fan of the X-Men knows, Bishop ends up taking Nathan Summers into the future. He's kind of raised in the future, and that's exactly what happens here.
Yeah.
Jean and Scott, Clone Jean and Scott have to say goodbye to Nathan, and Bishop takes him back into the future with him to cure him of whatever Sinister's kind of done to him, this virus that he's kind of been imbued with. And then we get Clone Jean. We see her. She leaves. She has a little parting with ways with Jean. She says that she's now Madeline Pryor.
Right.
And then the last thing we kind of pick up with Storm, and she's kind of met Forge at a bar.
Yeah.
And Forge is he's kind of found Storm, and he wants to help her regain her powers, and that's kind of where we leave off in episode 3. I set it up this way. I took 1, so you can take episode 4. Todd.
Oh my God.
Yeah, tell us about episode 4 a little bit. Here,
I just
Todd.
want to mention this thing about episode 3. I saw somebody post this, and I thought it was kind of funny. I don't know, but they're having the scene where, they've got the baby back at the mansion, and, they're wanting to send it to the future. And Scott's like, I'm not going to do him like this. I'm not going to abandon
not gonna
him
be a
like my
part of
father
this."
abandoned me, I'm not going to abandon him. And when it comes time for him to actually leave, he's like, I can't be a part of
can't
this.
be a part of
And
this.
he walks out. I'm sorry.
No,
It is-
I mean, like, that, it's true. I think I saw somebody say something like
Yeah.
that, too. It's like he wants no part of his child being abandoned so much that he'll abandon him prematurely to abandoning him. So, yeah, I understand what you mean.
On to episode 4.
Yeah, on to episode 4, by far the weakest. And
Yeah,
I'm like, it's
I
not
would
that I
agree.
don't like Jubilee, and it's not like I don't like Jubilee, and I'm just kind of getting used to Roberto. Obviously, he's kind of being introduced into all this, into the dynamic, but go ahead.
So basically, the first part is called Motendo. I believe it was Motendo.
Yes. Yeah, some kind of X-Men game.
Yeah. So basically, it's just it's Jubilee's birthday. I think it said it was her 18th birthday, and Magneto's
18
just
for 30 years.
Magneto's just wanting everybody, to hit the danger room, do the drills, get trained up, and she's like, it's my birthday. We're
Yeah.
going to celebrate. We're going to party, and I think she wanted everybody to go to the video store. But
Arcade.
of course, that didn't fall through, so they wound up, her and Roberto was just playing in their room, and she notices like something called a Motendo. And they're like,
Yeah.
where did that come from?
A game system she doesn't own.
Yeah, so they wound up, I think, getting actually drawn into it, and it's how the whole thing is set up by Mojo. If you know the X-Men, Mojo, and his whole thing is just to kind of put them into the game and kind of force them to play the game. I remember there was a Asteroid M level, there was a Sentinel Street Fight level.
There was one more that I forget what exactly it was. There's another level
Yeah.
that's like
I think the
straight
big boss at the end was Magneto.
Yeah. Yeah, and then he's like broadcasting this to some kind of audience somewhere.
Right.
And the tempting idea for Jubilee is that he or she kind of gets to like too much changes and too much is different out in the real world. Here she gets to the enticement in staying in the video game is nothing changes. She gets to do this. She knows what to expect. Nothing new is thrown at her. She can tackle these levels, and she always knows how it's going to end, and she's always able to like meet the challenges, whereas the real world, that's not always the case. And that's, you kind of see a little pulling at her character dynamic a little bit. And also kind of Roberto, he's kind of more still an afterthought. Like they haven't really done a lot with him. He's kind of he's a rich kid and kind of a reluctant mutant, even like he's kind of reluctant to use his powers. He's kind of, for lack of a better word, he's kind of disgusted in a way by what he is, like to a small degree. He's not like, he doesn't hate himself, but he's not yet embraced the idea that he's a mutant, and he hasn't told his parents or anything like that. So you get a little of that stuff, but it's really a Jubilee centric episode. It's like a video game meets Tron in a way, because you kind of get the Tron like character is like old Jubilee. That comes in. There's a version of Jubilee that was already built into the game that didn't get erased. It's a little bit like Wreck-It Ralph and Glitch or whatever, where like she was able to stay behind and stay in the game, and she's like a glitch in the game, and she's kind of helping Jubilee and Roberto like stay alive. She gives them like an extra life token and those kind of things. So like there's some good stuff in it. And animation, there's like some where they do something like 2D side-scrolling fighter animation and stuff, and like classic X-Men arcade cabinet kind of looking stuff. Like there's some good little stuff like that. I'm not saying it's a terrible episode, but it's by far the weakest.
Maybe they thought that episode 3 was a little too dark and they had to lighten her up a little bit.
Maybe. Like I said, I think it's wasted real estate where you could have drug out that Jean Grey storyline and had more, because we go real quick through that episode 3, and it's not a negative, but like we go real through, like maybe seeing Scott a little bit more have to adjust the idea, like, oh, I've been banging a clone, like like have him adjust to that, have Jean adjust to like the fact that she might be a clone a little bit more, see a little bit more of the other X-Men's perspective about how their friend Jean Grey may have been tortured and cloned for months in Mr. Sinister's mansion. And like those kind of things, you could have just strung that out a little bit and taken out the Jubilee stuff and replaced that. If you needed a B story, put the Storm and Forge stuff, because that's another problem I have with episode 4 is like we're really like speeding through this Storm and Forge relationship stuff. He goes from like meeting her in the bar, and I don't remember enough about the original show about how much interaction they did or didn't have in the original show, but in this he goes from like, hey, you're at this bar, I'm a friend of Charles Xavier and I want to help you, and then in episode 3 and episode 4 is like, I love you,
right.
I want to have babies with you. And like it goes real quick.
That needed a lot more time to breathe.
You needed to breathe that out. I like that. I want to see more Storm stuff, and I'm hoping that we get it, because that's kind of the last little part here. We learn a little bit about Forge. He's wanting to help Aurora, not only out of just a sense of being a good guy, but he also is kind of responsible for the technology behind those mutant collars, which by association he created the technology that ended up being part of that rifle that took her powers. So he kind of feels responsible, and also he's developed these feelings very quickly for her. I mean, they're kind of living together in his little house, and they're having this like kind of desert spiritual connection kind of thing, and she's not really so much going for it. As far as what we see, he kind of confesses his love, and she smacks him in the face and walks away, and she gets kind of sucked into this. There's a mention of like an owl that she sees before that keeps flying and circling around, and the winds don't change. The owl never goes anywhere. When they're on like a little romantic horseback ride through the desert, and at the end of it, when she goes away, you think she's kind of riding the horse and doing all this, and she's going away, and she's going to get sucked back into this kind of weird kind of spiritual, whatever you want to call it here, entrapment by a villain called the Adversary, who was another villain straight out of the comic books. And that's basically, I think the Adversary is kind of like it's kind of like a demonic kind of presence, like a kind of a spiritualist kind of villain kind of thing. So like, I don't know a lot about the Adversary. I just know it's a comic book character. I was like another straight out of the page. Like this whole Storm Forge is another straight out of the comic kind of storyline. So I'm interested to kind of see where that goes. But like, I wish that could have had a little bit more time to breathe, and that could have been part of 3 and 4, and we could have just had a big 2-parter, already off the bat, because maybe you're right, maybe it was too dark for what
Yeah.
was going on in episode 3 for them to
Because I think that second part, was it called Life Death?
Life Death Part 1.
I think that, yeah, because I think that was more, that was kind of a famous part of the X-Men comics back in the day, and that's why I hope there's more to come of that. There should have been more of that, and, you know, the Jubilee video game thing.
Yeah, like I said, if I'm going by, I think episode 1, I'll say 7. I'm gonna say episode 2 a 7. Episode 3, I'm gonna give an 8,
Oh, yeah.
and episode 4, I'm gonna give like a 6 if I had to go individually.
Sounds fair.
But I mean, for me, I think the biggest thing is like this is a really strong show. We have been kind of turned off from Disney and Marvel for a while because the lackluster quality of products that we're getting. Like we have not been keeping up with Star Wars. We've not been keeping up with like we don't watch What If and all, you know,
Yeah.
these kind of other animated shows Disney's put out. Like we've been kind of turned away. This had enough kind of like backing to it and enough like kind of like I wonder what that could be, wonder what they're going to do with this. They had enough nostalgia to kind of pull us both into watching these, and I'm glad we did.
Yeah.
I think it's a solid, like a very solid show, and I think if there's anything of this like nonsensical like woke versus non-woke stuff that's kept anybody away from it, I would urge you to kind of give it a shot, especially if you're a fan of the original show. I don't think there's anything here that you're going to hate. I think the characters that you like are still here, and they're growing up just the same way that you've hopefully grown up.
Yeah. And one thing I think maybe we should mention, and I don't have the gentleman's name in front of me right now, but there was a guy that was kind of over this project, kind of a lead on it. I think Disney's already let go. Did you hear about that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that's a cause for concern.
I don't remember the details of why
Yeah.
they let him go. I don't remember. I was going to look that up, but I'm like, I don't want to spend too much time on the controversy because I don't want to take away from like the show itself. But that
True.
was something that happened. I think he was like the showrunner, like one
Yeah.
of the big guys on the show. They shit canned him for whatever reason. I
Right.
don't know if it was a valid reason or not, I can't say, but like, yeah, there's been a little too much to be said about the behind the scenes stuff of this.
Right.
Like, and I think, you know, our point here is like, this is a damn good show.
Oh, yeah.
Like,
If
you
this
know,
is the future of Marvel animation, I'm down.
yeah, this is something like, it's one of those things like, you know, like if they said they were coming back and doing like Batman the Animated Series again, like how close will you get to that? Like, how much are you going to go back and like how close you're going to be and how you're going to like evolve it? And it's like always a very fine line, especially with something that's as beloved as the X-Men in general, but as beloved as this show was for kids that grew up in the 90s, and even, you know, people that just enjoyed it for what it was, that didn't necessarily grow up in the 90s, that, you know, kind of come to it like you. I mean, you weren't born to the 90s, but you were in that same demographic that were
Right.
looking for animated shows at the time, and this is something that stuck with you too. So it's a very fine line to walk, and like it's one of those things, it's like it's a big challenge to kind of please people. And from what I've seen, like most of the real people in the reviews, it seems pretty positive. And so far, like I'm definitely going to keep up with it. I don't know if we'll review every episode, but maybe we'll come back to it at the end of the season. I don't know how many episodes we're getting, but maybe we'll come back to it at the end of the season and see how it finishes up, and then kind of go from there. But highly recommended from me.
Definitely recommended for me, too.
Final thoughts?
Just Marvel. If you got more stuff like this, Marvel Disney in the pipeline, please do it.
Yeah.
I wouldn't even mind seeing them go back and like how DC animation used to do, like animate some of the more classic storylines, like maybe a Captain America Winter Soldier animated,
House of M.
Astonishing
X-Men.
yeah, Iron Man Extremis.
Yeah, because
and-
Disney animation ain't hitting for shit either.
Yeah.
I'm telling you, Disney animation used to be Marvel movies down here, Disney animation up here, Disney movies down here. Now it's Marvel movies up, Marvel animation slowly coming
Yeah.
up, and Disney movies, Disney animated, just bottoming the fuck out.
Like I say, this is the most heat I've had for any type of superhero property in, I'd say, over a year now.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of it's kind of churned up interest for a revival of the Spider-Man animated series.
Definitely would be
I'd
down
be
for that.
behind that. Get that classic Spider-Man animated series intro to
Spider
Blood. Yeah, exactly. Let's go into reviews, Todd. We'll just kind of give an overall view of the first 4 episodes, just kind of as an average. So we rank shows on a scale of 1 to 10, starting from 1. The ranks are torture, 2 awful, 3 bad, 4 subpar, 5 mediocre, 6 decent, 7 good, 8 great, 9 amazing, 10 masterpiece. Todd, give us your review score for X-Men 97.
I would say overall, taking into all 4 episodes into account, I would probably give this a solid 7.
For me, I'm going to give it a little bit more, I think, just because 3 was so strong, 2 was good, 1 was good, 4 was weaker. I'm going to give it an 8 overall, which ranks it as great. I think, again, if you're a fan of the original show, there's a lot to love here, and it's kind of growing up the characters, and there's some interesting dynamics, and there's some storytelling that's good for all ages. You can sit down with your kids and watch this if you have them. It's not too violent. It's not too over the top. There is some blood, I like, you know.
Yeah.
You get some of that little blood around the mouth,
Yeah.
and, like, you know, there's a couple scenes where Magneto gets tore up by the Goblin Queen and stuff like that. So, like, but it's not over the top. I think, you know, if you have kids of a certain age, you know, I think it would be good to kind of sit down and watch this with them as well. So, like, there's a lot to love here for everybody, and this is more what you need to be doing, Disney.
Exactly.
This is Marvel, Disney. This is what you need to be doing. You need to focus on some quality stuff, and this is a great revival of a really good classic, nostalgic TV show. So I'm interested to see where it goes. Todd, tell everyone how they can find us and get in touch with us on social media.
We are at Tau Capes on YouTube, Twitter, and Instagram. Tau Capes Podcast on Facebook. You can also email us at taucapespod@gmail.com.
If you enjoy the show, please consider leaving a like on the video and subscribing to our channel. Tau Capes will return. We want to thank you so much for watching. Until next time, bye, guys.
See you guys.